Okay, let's talk about missing pronouns or when the I disappears. Have you ever noticed that some people stop saying I when they're talking about something important? It sounds like a small thing, but sometimes can be surprisingly revealing. When people describe events they genuinely experience, they usually place themselves in the actual story or the narrative. I went to the shop, I saw him, I opened the door, I picked up the phone. The word I appears naturally. Why? Because they're describing their behaviour, because they're talking about their own experience. But occasionally that changes. Imagine asking someone, did you damage the car? Instead of saying, I didn't damage the car, they say the car got damaged or there was some damage to the car. Notice what's happened there? The person has disappeared from the sentence. They've literally removed themselves and not taking ownership. But the ownership is the issue. Here's another example. You ask, what happened to the missing money? Instead of saying, I spent it, they say, the money was used. Again, the action happened, but nobody seems responsible. In linguistics, and I've spoken about linguistic models before, we call this distancing language. It's a subtle way of editing or creating psychological distance between ourselves and something we would rather not own. Now, before you jump to conclusions, this doesn't mean someone is lying on its own. People also distance themselves when, say, they're embarrassed or ashamed or traumatized, talking about something emotionally difficult for them. That's why context matters. One change in language is never enough on its own. But if someone suddenly stops using I, together with some of the other things I've spoken about in these videos, at exactly the point where the story becomes important, it's worth paying particular attention to. As an investigator, I'm not looking for proof, I'm looking for clues and evidence, clues that tell me where I should ask another question or follow up because one question hasn't been answered or they've been evasive. So instead of accusing someone, I might simply ask, can you walk me through exactly what you did next? That often encourages them to place themselves back into the story. And sometimes that's when new information begins to emerge. So the next time you hear someone tell a story, listen carefully. Do they naturally use I, me, and my? Or when the pressure increases, do they suddenly disappear from their own story or narrative? Because sometimes it's not just what people say, it's how they position themselves in their story, within that story they're in fact telling. I'm Steve Van Appen, and remember the truth always leaves some degree of clue. Just a quick disclaimer, no single word on its own or language pattern proves deception. People may change their language because of stress, trauma, embarrassment, culture, personality, or neurodivergence, or trauma, or anything along those lines. Always consider the full context and look for clusters or groups and indicators of behaviour rather than relying on any one single sign. This is important to know when you're conducting any type of interview. I'm Steve Van Appen.